In the IDP community, there's a fine line between law and chaos. On that line live Jorge Edwards and Mike Wohlert. This is Shoot the Gap. I'm your host, Nate Markham. That may be one of the final lines from the other guys that we have a chance to spew for the 2022/2023 NFL season. But we're going to finish on the highest of notes. We're going to look back at a couple of the rankings that we had preseason and just see how wonderfully intelligent we are or stupid we are. Jorge, good evening, my friend. Welcome back.
Good evening. Good evening. How are you all doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. I can't speak for Mike.
No,
Mike's
I
on
can't.
brand. Wow, that's
Yeah, got the readers on. I'm might as well
I'm liking it. I'm liking it.
keep them on.
Oh, sure.
As I said, of course, this is Shoot the Gap, the IDP podcast for Fantasy and Frames, bringing another week for, well, most people's seasons are over. I know my seasons are over, ending on a high note. Mike's season is over, ending on a high note. Jorge's season is over. And I digress. So, I'm just kidding. Jorge, I'll tell you what, all of our seasons end on a high note because I got to say, I am just blown away by the show. I got to say, this has been a great year. I feel like we had some good content, went smooth the entire time. And I just want to tell both you two and Hollywood, of course, will join us shortly. Thank you guys. I appreciate everything you guys have done this year.
Yeah, it'll be nice to be able to take a rest, and my shoulders and back will get a rest after carrying the podcast all season. So we'll get some much needed rest.
Yes,
but I'm kidding, of course. It was fun coming on every week to shoot the shit.
On Shoot the Gap. Haha.
Keep the jokes to me, Jorge. We brought you on for
looks.
Looks. Exactly.
Do you like my collection of 17s, by the way? That was not planned. It just so happened that whenever jersey I got, I'm like, oh, that person has a 17. Oh, that person has a 17. And there we go. Lucky numbers with the 54 down. Is that Powerball?
There, yeah.
So is that enough for a Powerball? I don't know. I don't know how that works.
I don't think that you have
need two more numbers.
Same number. And
two more numbers?
Yeah. And I don't know everything, but I would not pick the same number 3 times in Powerball, Jorge. Something tells me that the odds aren't going to be great.
The odds aren't great anyway, so Jorge, do what you need to do. Exactly. If you're coming up with some strategy, well, Powerball on this day, you got to come up. Yeah, there's no.
Hey, sometimes you know what? Got to be a peacock. Let you fly.
That's right.
That's number 2.
No, but it's super exciting. To piggyback off what you said, just having everybody on the show, and I think it definitely exceeded expectations heading into this season, and looking into already next season and what we're doing there. We'll hit some once we get a little bit further into the new year, maybe come back with some IDP content towards the draft, and then next thing you know, guys, we're right back in it next summer, and it's gonna be awesome. Can't wait.
Machine never stops.
That's true.
It doesn't. And this machine, I would say, has been pretty well oiled. I think that for the most part, we had an accuracy as good as most. As I alluded to before, we're gonna look back at our preseason rankings and mostly just, mock each other probably for what the hell were we thinking? Maybe pat ourselves on the back, Mike, if your shoulder can handle.
I know
it's back patting.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't worry.
I'm still getting the kinks out.
He's probably also got shoulder damage from all the online bets now that Ohio has opened up the delinquency that I am so envious of. I can't wait till we can here. And that would just make a lot more sense. Eventually, it's just going to turn into a betting show whenever Illinois and Missouri both have it. Or Missouri and Ohio both have it.
Really? You can't do DFS anything?
I can do DFS, but I just can't bet online. I can't bet sports in Missouri.
Like a sports book. You can't use that.
Correct. Illinois, you can. I can go across the river for 20 minutes 30 minutes.
That's
and
so
bet.
stupid.
I know.
That's so dumb. That's really dumb. I will say I did hit a 2-leg parlay on Sunday with Jalen Thompson and Willie Gay on their overs on the tackles.
Nice. Willie Gay one was a tough one because
Willie Gay was a little bit of a sweat. Jalen Thompson hit his over in like the first, like early in the second quarter, he hit his over early on. I will say, if you are betting and you are doing or sack props, keep an eye on Preston Smith and his sack prop, because he needs 2 sacks to hit a big incentive. So, and I think he is like 1 or 1.5 away. So that is one of the sack props I'm probably going to hit up once I see it.
I looked at a few of those of the incentive laden situations across the NFL to see who was close to what. And I did see that Kenny Galladay, I believe, only needs 76 receptions tomorrow or this weekend to get a $500,000 bonus. Tip of the cap. Good luck, Mr. Galladay. We hopes are with you, my friend. Don't go spending all that money in one place. You're gonna need it.
What a contract.
Yeah. That was a rough one. But let's pivot on a positive note, not some of this, because, well, there's nothing that we could have got as wrong as the Kenny Galladay props preseason. So I think that we're going to be more optimistic with some of our defensive line picks.
Don't let me into the we on the Galladay. I had nothing to do with that with you guys.
Yeah, I'm not
I had nothing to do. Oh, hell no.
Okay.
I had no
okay. All right.
I meant the collective we as like everybody in the NFL. No one expected Kenny Galladay to be the wide receiver 6 on the Giants. Maybe they did.
Hey, don't insult the real wide receiver 6. That person has a name
who we don't know.
But
yeah, exactly. It's yeah. All right. So let's take a look around the defensive line at the end of the season. Are you guys as shocked? We talked about this a little bit before with the amount of defensive tackles that finished as the defensive line 1 overall. And I'll read through real quick as far as, according to Fantasy Pro Scoring, which is what we'll use, the final scoring defensive line, if you're watching, looks like this. And on a total point basis, Max Crosby, followed by Nick Bosa, and then Hassan Reddick. And we'll jump to some of the defensive tackles. Christian Wilkins, excellent season. Jorge, your Commander teammates, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen at 7 and 8.
Yeah,
was there
crazy?
And that's Jonathan Allen only playing 14 games as well, which is even you imagine if he played 16 games, there's a chance that he would have been the number 3, maybe 4 on the season. I mean, hell of a season for those two. Quinnen Williams, again, 15 games at 10th. And then rounding it out is DeForest Buckner. If we want to extend it just a little bit further, of course, Chris Jones coming in at 13 and Javon Hargrave at 15. But, Mike, if you were going into next season, will you set your rankings, or when you do that is, are you even going to think that this is maybe becoming more the norm, that you're seeing defensive tackles getting more pressure in the middle? They're becoming just more athletic, more likely to put more in your top 12? Because if we look at our top 12 from the preseason, there's basically maybe one consensus defensive tackle that any of us had, and that was Aaron Donald.
I'd probably consider it, but there was a lot of I think it's still a variant position, because the year before Aaron Donald was 2. I think there were only 2 defensive tackles in the top 15. I think Hargrave was a 15, and I think Donald was 2 last year. So they'll probably make my top 25, maybe my top 25, 30, but I'm not gonna pay again for those guys. Maybe Buckner would probably be a guy I would consider again. And probably Jonathan Allen would probably maybe squeak in the top 20. But no, some of the, these defensive tackles, they're a little bit more athletic, but I think it's again kind of I think it'll be just a variant position.
Corey, you agree with that, or are you starting to see that maybe some of these defensive tackles, like the Christian Wilkins, and the pretty much everybody on this list, we're seeing it's not just levied by sack volume, but it's also having pretty sustainable floors in tackle volume.
Yeah, I don't want to say the cop-out answer that these players just happen to face a bunch of run-heavy teams and therefore they got the opportunities for tackles, but maybe there's some truth to that. I don't have any data to support that. But, we look at, when we're talking about defensive linemen, or we have been all of the season, one very important sticky stat we like to look at is win rate. And you look at some of these defensive tackles, like they just are getting, they're beating their blocks and they're getting to either the ball carrier or the quarterback. And so I think there's some validity to that. In terms of would I still prioritize a defensive tackle in my drafts? Probably not, unless there's a defensive tackle position that needs to be filled. But I think what we're seeing is really impressive in the sense that, the days of scoffing necessarily at inserting one into your lineup is
that's gone.
Quinnen Williams is probably the best example of that all season long for the Jets. Like literally, he was a waiver wire ad, inserted him in my redraft league, one of my redraft leagues. This is really like the easy bake oven, set it and forget it, and it's those days are gone, like Mike just said.
Yeah, I would consider drafting and having a defensive tackle in my DL general over a cornerback in my DB general every day of the week.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think you consider defensive tackles as like a DL 2 or 3, kind of depending on your scoring. Like I'll have more probably sprinkled within like I said, the top 25, top 30. Probably more than I probably would, but yeah, I mean, if we're talking like top 12, I'm still going to go for like, the Garretts and the Boses and the Crosbys.
Yeah. I think that I'll say one thing on this year, doing more best ball IDP leagues than I've ever done, which is, I believe, 2 total leagues. So that sets a lot about how many IDP best ball leagues I've ever played in. But I found that the defensive tackle position for those over the season has provided a nice steady floor going in. Doesn't mean I want to stack a ton of defensive tackles in those leagues, but having 1 or 2 just seems to offset that boom or bust weeks that we're getting out of some of the defensive ends that, have 2 tackles and no sack, or 4 tackles and 2.5 sacks, where that variance is so large. A lot of the guys Christian Wilkins was pretty heavy on a lot of my teams just because he kept falling. And then Chris Jones, who comes in at 13. But it's, like Jeremy says, makes me take more seriously picking up a defensive tackle off waivers and starting with some floor confidence.
I didn't think Christian Wilkins was going to repeat his tackle, but 93 tackles later, or 95, I should say.
I really didn't think that it would be that high either, but I don't disagree, Jeremy. I'm going to take high upside defensive ends first too. I think one thing that we found out is that, at least hopefully people reading any of our articles that we have had over at Fantasy and Frames or following this show, there's a lot of the times, man, we had defensive tackle in our sack lunch episode or portion a ton, because we dove a little bit deeper and we found those interior line matchups where it made sense. And I think that more times than not, there was a span there, Mike. I think it was like 3 weeks in a row that between you and I want to say we had about 6 sacks over the course of like 3 weeks from defensive tackles or high end defensive ends. So I wish, again, that's where Missouri Sports Bets would have been nice if we could have thrown a couple bucks on some of them sack lunches and actually been able to buy a sack lunch, which is a dangerous game.
If
we were betting money last week, we would be eating ramen noodles this week.
That's true.
It's interesting. We go back to last year, guys, when we were doing the show, and every pre-show meeting we would get in here when we're talking about our picks, and the thing was like, "Hey, did you see how badly this offensive tackle graded? Oh my God, this is such a mismatch. It's not even crazy. And this year, when doing research, I'm like looking at, okay, tackles are grading out well. And it's like really been the offensive interior linemen, like you were just talking about, Nate, that have been the people there that have had the mismatch. And so I just find that odd that all of a sudden in the span of a year, teams got smart and it's like, damn, we better adjust this tackle position. Not everyone. Not everyone.
No, not everyone. But
I thought that was rather interesting.
It was just there was such a lack of depth at guard that it, like with Houston, I attacked Kenyon Green every single week, and it took until week 12, week 13 for them to even make a change. And they had the audacity to say it wasn't play related. It was, well, it's a rotation to keep people, healthy and active. And even the Houston Texans fan base was like, that's the most ridiculous thing. Like, he's been horrible. Why don't you just admit that you did it because of play? At least you make yourself look like you made a good decision coach-wise instead of oblivious for the past 13 weeks that he's allowed, 5 pressures a game and a sack and a half. But I digress. Let's take a look. Let's see how everybody did, Jorge. How did everybody finish in the preseason rankings from defensive line? Hollywood's not here right now to defend himself. But
so what do the yellow highlights mean?
They're in the top 15.
Top 15. Okay, perfect.
So you should highlight Reddick for me because I had Reddick there, didn't I?
Well, he was technically classified on Fantasy Pros as a linebacker, not a defensive lineman. And here, when we're looking at the rankings, it's just talking about pure defensive linemen.
Well, I would.
Well, Reddick is right there. He's third.
Oh, shit. My bad. Thank you. So we're just going to... Boom. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do.
Nope, you want to change that bad boy to yellow? There we go.
There we go.
So, yeah. So, Hollywood looks a little better now that he has a few of the names. Obviously, Nick Bosa coming in as the basically the number 2, so the sack leader on the season as his number 3. TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, of course, injury, hampered seasons.
Yep.
It does. There's not much
injury.
But with TJ Watt and Aaron Donald on a per game basis, we're both, still elite in terms of the per game. The problem is it wasn't a good draft pick whenever you have to miss half a season for those guys. Yeah. Eventually have all of them.
Okay, you know what? I didn't have time to prep for this ahead of time. I'm sorry.
You're doing fine, buddy. You're doing okay. So Bosa, Danielle Hunter, who really came on strong, Mike, towards the very end. It looked like what do you think you can attribute that to? Is that Danielle Hunter getting more comfortable in a new quote unquote like position or approach to outside linebacker edge? Or do you think that was just a matter of the cream eventually, rising to the top and him doing what he's supposed to do?
I always attribute it to, guys are gonna the good players are always going to get to the norm, like in baseball. Like if you have they'll finish, they'll all finish to where they're supposed to. Like Mike Trout, you project him to hit 320 with 35 home runs and 120 RBIs. He's going to go through a stretch of like really shitty, but then he's going to go off for a month.
Yep.
And then he'll have maybe another, shitty couple of weeks. He'll get hurt, and then, he'll come back, and then his numbers will settle to where they're supposed to be. And that's kind of what that's, what I attribute these guys to. They're, it's a variant position. And, the guys that they're facing, they're being paid to not allow sacks. And, sometimes like last week, the shitty Tennessee Tennessee offensive lineman gave up, I think, 3 total pressures all game.
Yep.
And they've been one of the worst offensive lines.
Go back the week before that, the Rams allowed 4 total pressures against Denver, and they've been atrocious all year.
So in some instances, there's just going to be one of those games where it just doesn't make any sense. So, but I think it's just one of those things where talent or moves will beat things out, and they'll settle to the norm.
Yeah. Rounding out Hollywood, like we said, we talked about Hassan Reddick, Max Crosby at 14. definitely finishing as the number one defensive lineman. So, Mike, you had Max Crosby at 11. Hollywood had him at 14. Jorge and I had him down. Jorge, if you'll scroll down just a little bit more, buddy. Matt, we had him there. Like I had him at 11, and Jorge had him the highest of all of us at 4. What, Mike? Since Jorge, you had him the highest of all of us, but Mike, was that a concern of the fact that Chandler Jones was there that you thought maybe some of the production might drop?
No, I just wasn't expecting all the tackles.
Fair. Yep.
I mean, he had a crap. I mean, he's got 84 tackles, and then if you factor in some of the scoring, where if you're getting TFLs and if you're getting tackles for loss, he's got 20 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
So I didn't factor in the tackles and all I didn't factor in the tackle volume. I knew the sacks were going to be there. I knew he'd have double-digit sacks. I think I projected him at like 40 or 50 tackles all season. So, I just wasn't expecting all the tackles.
I mean, how could you? 84. I mean, that was incredible.
Yeah.
Jorge, any of Hollywood's picks stand out that, like surprise? None of them really were surprise finishes that were outside of any of our other top 15s that, that hit.
So, I'm sorry. Are you saying, am I surprised that some of the stuff that didn't hit?
No, I'm not. I'm not surprised. There's nobody. Hollywood didn't really go out on a limb with any big names that hit, or we missed on the ones we all collectively missed on. A lot to do with injury. Harold Landry, TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, Chandler Jones, of course, had a down season. He finished extremely strong, maybe the strongest of anybody on this list as far as pressure wise.
I don't know. I guess I'm looking at Trey Hendrickson. Definitely a very, last season sack heavy. But that's kind of that's kind of the, and maybe like a low medium tackle floor. But, I think we saw after the playoffs last year, like just how well this defensive line played in the playoffs and how well Hendrickson played. I guess the argument could be made that maybe that was a little too high and that was more of a recency bias thing. But I mean, I don't think any of us expected the drop off for Hendrickson that we saw this year.
Yeah, I think his pressures may have been I think he might have had a ceiling in pressure because he went from 50 in 2020 to 87 in 2021, and now he's back to where he leveled out. So we only had 58. So fewer pass rush snaps, but I think you can he didn't really miss. Did he miss a game? Maybe one game.
I think it was a game after he broke his wrist or whatever.
So he had 560 pass rush snaps. He's got 369 this year. He had 384 in 2020. So, and he played 893 snaps. He's only got 611 this year. So production matches the decrease in playing time.
There we go. And so I will take this into account next year because Trey was big on my list. Clearly, I mean, I had him as high as anybody.
It was definitely volume. His production was definitely volume related for sure, and his volume seems to be really scaled back this year. It seems.
Yeah. Let's go, Mike. Let's take a look at your defensive lineman. You obviously had as successful as any of them. You hit on 8 of your 15. The only ones outside of your the top 15. Again, TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, Harold Landry, Joey Bosa, all injury related. And then just right outside that is, like Josh Allen, Za'Darius Smith, Rashawn Gary. If you could go back to the beginning of this season and obviously know a little bit about Landry, TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, was there any name that you can remember that was big that you wanted to throw in there, like that you were excited, you were a little trepidatious that you kind of wish you had gambled on to put in there? It's a tough question because I'm asking you to try to remember.
Yeah.
7 months ago.
Honestly, even though he finishes within the top 30, I might have put in someone like Montez Sweat instead of Harold Landry.
Yeah.
So that's someone who I'd probably put in there, and I'd probably have DeMarcus Lawrence within my top my top 15 this year as well. Those are probably a couple of names I probably would have swapped Zadarius Smith and Harold Landry for guys like Montez Sweat and DeMarcus Lawrence. I still stand by Rashawn Gary. I'd still have him in my rankings.
But he was pacing that
things
way,
were really looking good for him. So those are the two names I'd probably switch out.
Yeah, Rashawn Gary would have. I mean, like you said, pacing. Hell, let's just take through 9 weeks, not even double it, but take 50, more. He's sitting at, he would have double-digit sacks. He'd have probably close to 50 tackles or 40 tackles, we'll say. And then the amount of quarterback hits and tackles for loss. I like Rashawn Gary a lot going into next year, and I think maybe this might be a good buying opportunity. And
I'm I don't know how I didn't have Brian Burns in my top 15. That is, I don't know how I missed that.
You did. He's at 13.
He's at 13.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't even know my own rankings. All right.
Look at that. I got to tell you, looking at mine, I didn't know that I had so many. It's a long season, guys. There's a lot of squeegeeing of my brain that I try to forget a lot of things that I had thought at the time. I wish I could get rid of some more of the stupidity that I'm looking at with it. But Jorge, let's jump down to yours, since we have a lot. And I mean, honestly, this isn't an attempt to look at the number next to your name, which is 5 of the. I know. I know. We're gonna get there. Don't worry. But Nick Bosa at number 1. So
hey, you got the number 1 guy.
Yeah.
No, Crosby was 1. Sorry. Anyway,
but he had Crosby at 4. So you have the closest variance of 1 and 2 of anybody. And then whereas Myles Garrett, what he finished, Garrett was or is 5. So
he flipped his car.
Exactly. So you did your top is elite, Jorge. You nailed the top.
Yeah, I guess I also when I'm looking at here, I'm also guilty of recency bias going back to Hendrickson. I was expecting Zadarius Smith. I thought he was going to be a surefire producer just because he had been used to playing standing upright in Green Bay, and of course you have Danielle Hunter, which I think at the time we recorded this or we made these lists. I don't think the defensive coordinator for the Vikings had announced that they were switching to a 3-4 from the 4-3. I could be wrong.
No, I don't think they had yet.
So that was definitely disappointing. I thought the edge, when we were heading into this past season, we were thinking about for Vegas, it was like, oh well, Chandler Jones and Max Crosby on the edge. Oh, this is going to be a crazy tandem. Oh, Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter on the edge. Oh, this is going to be a crazy tandem. And no.
I'm very glad I did not succumb to the groupthink with Chandler Jones.
Yeah.
in my top 15.
That wasn't the best.
So this one pisses me off. I because let me show you why. Okay, let me bring this back over here. Okay. So let's look at points per game for a defensive lineman. Okay. Let's look at 11. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Let's go here to linebackers, who Judon was eligible for in most leagues as a defensive lineman. 11.2. He would have been in the top 10.
Yeah.
But grinding my gears here because God forbid, Fantasy Pros doesn't distinguish between interior and edge rushers. But that notwithstanding, that's why this grinds my gears that he didn't make the DL top 15. But
hey, guess what? Landry, you can highlight him yellow all you want, because Mike and I will agree with you that if he gained defensive line eligibility in the majority of scoring formats. So do it. Pat yourself on the back. We don't give a shit.
Cam Jordan, I really thought with the way that Marcus Davenport was playing down the stretch last season in 2021, that would help kind of carry over and free up Cam Jordan to have some more success. That didn't really happen. I got to be honest with you, as I'm trying to highlight this as close to burgundy as I can, guess that one, and then I switched that to this. I don't know where that came from. I honestly, I have zero idea. I have no idea where that came from. So I'll definitely take the major L on that. Bosa. Here's the question. Let's talk about Joey Bosa for a second. He's had concussion history. Then he had a different injury this year. At what point, and like we do with offensive players, at what point do we start to think, man, this is concerning?
Right, next season.
Because
Yeah.
I'll bump him down. He'll
And
get the treatment. He won't get the he'll get the treatment.
Yeah.
He'll be a value next year though. But a groin injury, that must have been one hell of a groin injury.
And that they say that's the one that, I mean, the recurring and everything, it just is just a bad situation. I probably will tell you, I don't think there's a situation that I probably draft him. I know the value could be there if everybody else in your league thinks the same thing and he falls.
You won't draft him?
I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to go with the same song and dance, but
so even if you had your DL group lined up and he was there, it's like your DL4.
and that's the thing is that's why I will never say never.
Yeah, you can't. There's no way I would pass that type of value up. I mean, it was like, I can't pass that up.
If I can easily rotate someone in from the waiver wire that's going to deliver that roster spot value of like a defensive, DL4, that's easy to replicate off the waiver wire. Mm-hmm. And if he's your 4, then all I have to do is wait for him to be healthy for those healthy stretches. And if, assuming we get those healthy stretches, because there should be, there was, we had, let's see, go back to 2021, and realistically, he gave you a full season and 10.5 sacks, and he had 3 games this year, and he had 2 sacks in in that time. I guess 1.5. I'll quit using small sample sizes. This again, Jorge Chase Young. Come on, what the hell's wrong with you? And then yet we go to mine, and here's what I don't get. He's there, and yet if I go to my and I'll share the screen here real quick.
Sure, let me stop sharing this one.
If we look at mine, and then I have to do the, be smarter than the screen here, and look at my Fantasy Pros preseason rankings, and where I had, oh damn, there we go. Sorry.
So how did you get to Chase Young in your top 10?
I don't know. I have no clue, because here's this. If you see,
because his injury he was already slated to potentially miss games.
Yeah.
I don't know because look, I have him at 46 preseason. For these are my Fantasy Pros preseason final rankings that goes into the the overall. Mm-hmm. And I had TJ Watt, and I could even start doing tiers, which I wanted to, but it just got redundant, I guess, with a lot of them. But it went Watt, Garrett, Bosa, Donald, still had Trey, had Max Crosby at 6, and then people like DeMarcus Lawrence at 11, Montez Sweat at 14, and you can see the rest here with Hutchinson at 20, but 46 for Chase Young I have there.
See, here we go. Same thing. Let me show you, just so people don't know I'm not smoking crack. Period, because that would.
So how did he?
I have no clue. I can't even explain how I ultimately, other than I wanted you guys to mock me incessantly, because look, he's not on Jorge's either, which is good.
Let me see where I have. Him. Hold on.
I'm going to say 38.
42.
42.
So I don't know where.
Still ahead of Quinnen Williams.
Yeah, that was hindsight.
Yeah, we screw up.
Holy crap! Where did? Oh no, that's week 18. Okay, never mind. I'm like, I had Quinnen Williams at 9, but I'm looking at my week 10. I'm looking at my week 18 rankings. Never mind.
So let's go back to your
thing. Yeah, and so. Again, we'll take it with a grain of salt for the most part. A lot of these preseason rankings, we did these, we put them all together. I'm sure it went back and forth. It is what it is. I'm happy. I mean, nothing's crazy. The only thing that I took some flack for early on was having enough faith in Aiden Hutchinson. And it was warranted that I thought he would be good. I think we all know that pro ready and everything else. But for him to finish, actually, I had him at 15, and he ends up finishing the season, in the top 25, top 15, I guess 20th overall. Pretty much goes right in line with where I had him on the Fantasy Pros, which is good for my, overall.
You just want to use our Fantasy Pros rankings going for the rest of the show versus going.
But I don't have Mike's.
That's right.
That's why we did that. But it's okay. Let's jump to linebacker, because I have we did a preseason prediction show that Mike, Hollywood, myself, Bob Miller, and Gary Davenport jumped on to join us, and we had some predictions, and we had the defensive line rookie of the year that who we thought it would be, and at defensive line, 4 of us outside of Hollywood all assumed it'd be Aiden Hutchinson. Hollywood said it'd be Kayvon Thibodeau, which pretty fair. But at linebacker, we asked the question really for, who would lead the league in tackles? And this is an interesting one because pretty much everybody was pretty close to using our rankings, and then some of the predictions where Hollywood had Bobby Wagner. Mike, you took CJ Mosley. I took Roquan Smith. Bob took Roquan Smith, and Gary took Jordan Brooks. And yet pretty much all the names finished at the end of the season in the top 15. But we look at the preseason linebackers, and there's some interesting names. Of course, headlining that name, the list is Blake Martinez. I mean, what are you going to do? What do you think? This is hypothetical, Mike. Where do you think Blake Martinez would have finished had he been able to play the whole season? You think he would have actually finished in the top 15 at linebacker?
I have no idea.
I don't either.
I have no clue. I don't know.
I really think he just he had no passion for the game, and he was into Pokemon and was content with that.
What? Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, he's selling Pokemon cards now.
Ah, how about that?
Yeah. Making a lot of money doing it.
Oh,
he sold the one card for, I think, $200,000. Yeah, we're in the wrong business, guys. Wrong business.
Clearly. My side hustle needs to be my side hustle, which needs to be my real job. Exactly.
No doubt. But, Blake Martinez, obviously Shaq Darius Leonard injured. What a bust. We throw in Zaire Franklin instead. What are we doing with Fred Warner, Mike? At the end of the day, Fred Warner is that just boring, kind of
steady
consistent
Eddie.
LB
Steady Eddie
on this season.
He's an LB2.
That's right.
And he's just like,
he's good. He's a good LB2. He's your, he's a dependable guy. I mean, is he elite? I don't know. I don't think he's elite. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he's a steady linebacker too that you can pretty much count on every week.
Yep.
Pretty much.
What about Cole Holcomb?
The dude was playing great. Just
right?
got injured. I mean,
injury.
I'm willing to go back to the well with Cole Holcomb, whereas I'm not with Joey Bosa.
Okay, that makes sense. I think Deion Jones here is interesting just because we had seen the decrease in tackle efficiency the past few years. But the production had been there. Just he was a beneficiary of volume. Mm-hmm. And given how bad Atlanta was predicted to be going into this year, I think that's probably the rationale here for Deion Jones again, just the volume.
Yep.
But who would have thought Rashaan Evans? So a Falcons linebacker was there in the top 10, top 15, but I did not see Rashaan Evans cracking that mark. So that would, that's okay. What are you gonna do?
As crazy as defensive line was, linebacker might be crazier for me in terms of the top 12. But go ahead, Mike. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna with I'm going to guess that Hollywood was assuming that Micah Parsons was going to go to off-ball linebacker and get tackles, and that didn't happen.
All right.
Yeah, I think that was kind of that was an unknown. No one really did know exactly what Micah Parsons was. I mean, you know what though? He still finishes the LB 16 overall, which
Right.
I mean,
just right there, just there.
but again, if he were to gain, if I don't know how they're going to score it. I mean, because he played enough at the edge that if someone decided to give him defensive line eligibility,
he's a defensive lineman.
I mean, he's my DL1 then next year. I think maybe 2. I don't know. There's that clump at the top is so good between Garrett, Bosa, him, and Watt that I don't think I would care if I got any one of them. But
you know, it's crazy. I think last year heading into the
out of 871 snaps, Micah Parsons played 693 on the edge. He's a defensive lineman.
He's a defensive lineman. There you go.
Yeah, but heading into last year, I think one of my concerns was, you know, just how, you know, these edge rushers that get the tackle floor on top of the quarterback hits and quarterback sacks. I thought that was going to devalue a lot of true defensive linemen, and that I don't know if that's really the case. I don't think that's what we saw this year. So,
well, Parsons has a pretty low. I mean, if you're comparing some of his tackles, I mean, I think he's a lower tackle producer. His tackle rate is not very good. Is not very efficient.
Right. So he's primarily just a pass rusher, pure pass rusher. Then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Which is to the point. It's like
Yep.
That's, you know, that's interesting heading into this year.
Yeah, and I'll take that. I mean, you know, the combination. If you look at the top 7 in total sacks on the season, Bosa, Reddick, Judon, Garrett, Parsons, Chris Jones, and Brian Burns, he's number 1 in tackles there. If he can maintain that top 6, top 7 sack production and still keep, I think that tackle volume would go down if he's not rotated. Like a lot of those games, he was playing a little bit more, I don't want to say less pass rush heavy because he was still involved pretty good, but I'm more comfortable with him as a defensive lineman probably than as a linebacker. Jeremy wants to know, is Devin White in your 2023 rankings? God, his consistency, lacking consistency is, I mean, an understatement if you ask me, unfortunately, because I'll be honest, I haven't even started looking at 2023 and I probably won't. So I don't know where he'd rest. Maybe in that LB2 tier. Yeah.
He still gets some sacks, but I mean, he still finished, at least in my scoring, as not looking at Fantasy Pros, but he still finishes the LB 16 in our scoring. So I mean, that's
he was 13
borderline LB 1.
Pros.
So
yeah.
I mean, that's consistency. Yeah, I mean, but he's still a weekly starter. His second half after the bye week wasn't very good, but last 2 weeks he's been good. But yeah, that's just you know, you got 11 people going after the ball.
Yeah,
right.
The perception of him is definitely down this year, right, Jorge?
Absolutely. You know, once we get into the swing of the off season and we start deep diving, you know, all the stats from this past year, you know, the same question that I think people ask on offense, you know, is the same one that should be asked on defense. When from week to week during your season, do you want the person who's volatile in terms of point scoring, but when they go off, or do you want somebody who has a steady floor, who gets you the 10 to 12 points on average a game? You know, the Mike Williams phenomenon. Like, you know,
for next season, if I might pass on Devin White and go Dre Greenlaw.
Right.
Not much separation between the two at the end of the season. I mean, you're talking about a 0.7, 0.6 per game difference between the two. I mean, 10 points. We'll say that. That wouldn't be much easier than me trying to do shit math on the fly like that. So yeah, 210 versus 200. His separation.
Yeah, it's not
negligible.
Yes,
it's the top. I mean, outside the top two, Aluakon, 22-point lead over number 2, which is the same separation between number 2 and roughly number 9 linebacker, number 10 linebacker. And then it just, everything's stacked pretty closely except for really him. He's the largest separation of most any positions. And I was wrong. I had him down way far. As you can see, he's not even really in my top 8. I think I have him there at like 11. What I don't want to, I don't even want to look at this, guys. Can we just take mine off? Let's highlight the positives. Yeah, Roquan Smith had a great season. Bobby Wagner had a good year. TJ Watt got hurt, whatever. Devin White, okay. Jordan Brooks was great. Fred Warner, boring. Darius Leonard hurt. Eric Kendricks, so.
That's another one, right? Like the addition of Jordan Hicks, that kind of like, not crater, but that like definitely brought him down a peg or two. And
without looking, Jorge, since I know you didn't have a chance to prep a lot of this, where do you think Eric Kendricks finished on the season?
16.
14. You were really close. So we use these terms like crater and impact, and did Jordan Hicks kill his value? He was an LB 14. And I'm, I would be more than happy to guarantee if I knew he was the number 9 linebacker off the board and he finished as the LB 14, I'd be thrilled. He just didn't. I don't know. I think Jordan Hicks's production at times overshadowed some of the Hendricks hype as far as being the guy there. So yeah. Micah Parsons, Blake Martinez gone. Then there's Luakon, Devondre Campbell. And why I had, I remember this conversation, the Tremaine Edmonds one more than anything else. I was just like, I got to change it. I don't like it. I'm not comfortable with having him there. I wanted to move him out, and I should have, because I never believed in it, and it rightfully so, considering he finished as the LB 51. My second biggest miss, I would say, of everybody, the first, I don't know, which is a bigger miss? Isaiah Simmons, he was LB 33. So, yeah, Tremaine Edmonds. Sorry, my bad. Logan Wilson finished pretty strong.
Edmonds, Edmonds was hurt.
Right.
Simmons has played, I think, every game. So I think if you factor in injury, Edmonds probably finishes ahead of Simmons.
Okay, well, there you go. See, that's why I have you on here, is you shed hope and positivity, but there was, what do you miss? 1, 2, 3 games. Yeah, hell, Edmonds had a couple pretty big games, but let's talk
Gotta
about
hit the fact that I have Micah Parsons in there, because
you hate that over
I
Deion
didn't believe
Jones?
it. I didn't believe it, and I thought I think I too thought he was going to be more of a off ball,
and that's rightfully so, because it wouldn't shock anybody to see him thrust into either one of those two roles. I think he's proven he's capable of playing both, but that athletic ability is hard not to take advantage of on the edge, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, what are our expectations of Cody Barton in terms of redraft value heading into next year? We saw the hype that he, had off of the 1.5 games from 2020 and 2021. And we saw the efficiency and we saw the opportunity. And it's like, yes, anyone who says I didn't believe in Cody Barton heading into this, you're a liar. Every single person was like, "Ew, Cody Barton. Have you heard about this guy, Cody? No, I was the first one to report on Cody Barton. I'm the one who shut up. We're all saying the same thing. We expected the upside. We saw the struggles early on. We saw him take off down the stretch. Is he, and Mike, I know you just said you're not even thinking about rankings right now, but is it outside the realm of possibility to say that he's definitely going to be in your top 24 this coming year, or is that too strong?
It all depends on what happens in the offseason. He's a free agent, so I don't know if he's going to be brought back. I would assume yes, because who knows the extent of Jordan. I mean, who knows whether Jordan Brooks will be ready for next season? Because I mean,
Oh,
he
the
tore his
ACL,
ACL
that's
last
right.
week,
Mhm.
so that's a
Right.
pretty late season injury. So they're already, shallow at linebacker. So I would assume he'd be brought back, and if he is brought back, and if Luke or if Brooks is going to miss the majority of the season, then yeah, I would absolutely have Barton in my top 10.
Totally forgot about
But
that.
again, it all depends on what happens in the offseason. If he is brought back, what did the Seahawks do to address the linebacker position throughout the draft free agency? So
Yeah.
it's way, way, way too early to tell.
Being way too early to tell. Same question in a different name attached to it. Shaq Leonard is there as your LB3 in drafts next year, knowing that he's having the,
No,
whatever
Pass.
your
Nope.
pass, right? Okay.
Nope.
I'm right there with you. I think that, I mean, we all knew he was returning from an injury that was dangerous to come back from anyway. And maybe was it early, and just nothing ever seemed to be there. What do you do? Is Zaire Franklin again, I think we're talking about stuff that I haven't researched enough to know. Roster construction. We don't know the draft. We don't know if there's going to be any type of overall like change as far as contract to any of them, free agency, et cetera, and who they're going to bring in. Maybe we'll talk about 2023 rankings a little closer to.
Well, Franklin's there for another season. Is there for another 2 seasons.
Okay.
He's like right now probably an LB3 for me, just because I'm taking these other injuries into consideration. But he's like right there on the cusp. But yeah, like Mike just said, I haven't even thought about rankings yet, but I think the case could be made for LB2, LB3, I think. High LB3, LB2, yeah.
But Mike, you were definitely, I mean, on all these, hit really close to a number of the names. None were just total. I mean, the Deion Jones had legs in terms of why. It just turned out to his legs just, it ended up walking to Cleveland, and then, you had to watch him every day. Well, every other weekend.
That whole linebacker rotation turned into be just god awful.
Ooh, I hate to say it. That might be one of the more difficult ones in all of football. And I mean, it sucks too, because I really had high hopes. I'm shocked that none of us had JOK there in our top 15. I was close with them. I know on some. I bet I probably had him. I had him at 18. So that was a really close one. And then Jorge, let's take a look at yours.
Sure.
And let's collectively look and say, hey, guess what? Those names look awful familiar. Basically the same across the board. None of them really, I would say, stand out to me, other than, you did good on putting a Luacan at 4, better, or 5, better than I did. And then again, there's the good tackle guys, Cole Holcomb, Fred Warner, D'Angelo, the kind of the boring that right in that spot where they should be. I don't have any questions or anything.
I guess my self-criticism here would be TJ Watt. I think in 2021 he came up as like one of the top linebackers in Fantasy Pros scoring. Just when in reality I should have just gone for like a more high volume linebacker in my top 15. I ranked the ceiling. That is correct. That's what I did. Yeah.
There's no way he was going to match his. That was a record-breaking year. There was no way.
Yep.
It was going to be tough to beat.
That was where I probably have that's probably the biggest question mark right there. But, yeah, I mean, I think, there's not really anything else outside of that's just jumping out. Like, it's egregious. I do wonder what Cole Holcomb's contract situation is heading into this year, because I thought Jamin Davis came on pretty strong in relief down the stretch. So I wonder what they're going to do with that situation going forward. So
I think you bring him back. I mean, he was the defensive captain until he left. I mean, you're not. I mean, You're certainly not doing anything with David Mayo or John Bostic again.
Yeah,
Come
exactly.
on. I mean,
No, you're
Jesus.
No,
Yeah.
no, exactly.
So,
But let's take a look. Let's quickly go through and highlight the linebacker leaders of 2022. Starting off with the aforementioned Foyce Aluakan, who had a tremendous season again. Roquan Smith coming in at number 2. Number 3, just, tugs on my heartstrings. Nick Bolton with an excellent season. So glad, so happy. Jorge, I know beginning of the season, we had quite a bit of back and forth with some other analysts and other people's opinions as far as can Nick Bolton be an LB1? Will he have the snaps? Does Spags give him the opportunity to be that guy? And it was proven that he has the overall tackle ability to maintain that consistent playing time in the floor. And Spags recognized that. Are we all comfortable with Nick Bolton breaking the Spags curse? And he's in my top 5 next year, right? Zaire Franklin, we know just he fit into a good situation for a tackle heavy process, and he did well with that. I mean, just because you have opportunity doesn't mean you're gonna come through with it.
What day did we do our? What day do you remember? Like the day we did our rankings.
This was like
that episode,
July, early before the expo. I want to say is when we did this.
Okay, because I definitely changed my rankings after that.
Yeah, so
because I had Nick Bolton 14, and I actually had Koromo at 15 in like my final preseason rankings.
I had Bolton at 19. I wish I would have moved him up further.
But I definitely had JOK 15.
And Bolton at 13.
Look at you.
I know.
Goddamn genius.
I had Okereke at 12.
Now that's a solid one.
Wow.
I had him at 13. I had him at 14. That's crazy.
And I settled in at 13 with Barton.
Yep. I was at 17 with Barton.
But looking here at like the top 15 in terms of points scored this season.
Yeah, because we all had Frankie Louvu.
Right.
Yeah,
no, but we all had Patrick Queen too, right? Like that was
right. That was shocking to me.
Yeah.
Like as soon as
Patrick
Roquan
Queen
came over, he just went.
He was the beneficiary of the Roquan trade for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was. I would say of the list, the names that obviously are shocking the most. Number 1 has to be Frankie Louvu, just because there was no even talk of Louvu. That is just that. But secondary to that, I'm really shocked at just the production that Drew Tranquil had. Not because I don't think he's a decent player, but man, it was. We talked about him on the prediction show that we mentioned Drew Tranquil, and it was not anything short of inflammatory. Does Jeremy say?
Jeremy got a question here. Thoughts on which top linebacker hit their ceiling this year?
Franklin.
Franklin
and
for Queen.
Sure.
Franklin and Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too. I mean, because I really actually believe TJ Edwards is capable of replicating seasons like this.
Oh, he had 100. I mean, he had 140 tackles last season. So,
right.
I mean, I think he's a solid an LB1 going forward.
The only question
even
I would have,
even with Nakobe Dean potentially coming in, because if Nakobe Dean slides in and plays the Kazir White role, White only played 65 to 70% of the snaps. Now you could say draft capital in Nakobe Dean, but I don't know. I still would have no problem with Edwards as my LB1 next year.
Yep, I'm right there as well. So yeah, I think that's the LBs for sure that hit their ceiling. Any other names? I mean, we talked about Dre Greenlaw at 17. Definitely was solid.
What do you think about this guy?
Joseph
Last
Jewell?
year he played like in 2 games in 2021. Average point per game was fantastic, but it was 2-game sample. Comes in and just destroys.
They played a zone defense. He settled in, got the target. Got settled in and found that open spot in the zone and just made tackles, both him and Singleton.
Yeah.
How high do you bump him up?
I probably keep him about where he's at. I
keep
might
him where he's at
somewhere.
I mean,
Yeah. Low end LB2, maybe high end LB3 at the.
There's so many
case.
with 17 games and so many linebackers getting 120, 100. I mean, they're just they're just all lumped in now. It's just it's like, oh, who did it's like, I've got this guy ranked 23. It's like, oh, you hate him. Like, no, because you've got everybody getting tackles. It's just, that's just, just the nature of the position now.
It's very
one guy I think will never draft again. I think I'm done with Jerome Baker.
Yeah, I am too. I very much am. Because it's not just because keep scrolling. Jorge, there you go at 37. The problem with Jerome Baker is this: click on his name and let's look at the game log as a whole. And the one thing with him is that he would have these stretches. I think it was weeks 13 through 16, somewhere around there, or 13, really 13 to 14. We see these blow up weeks where he has 12 and 11 tackles, and he has a run of those 3-game stretch where he has like a league leading amount of pass rush attempts. So you have this tackle floor and you have this sack upside, and you think, just do that every game. Just get the pass rush attempts. Give me that opportunity and get rid of weeks 4, 5, 6, 7, where he had 4 tackles, 2 tackles, 4 tackles, things of that nature. And I would be comfortable, but I don't trust. I trust weeks 15, 16, 17 to be more the norm than weeks 12, 13, 14. So I'm right there with you on Jerome Baker. I'm out on, I don't like any of the Miami linebacker situation right now. There's a lot of those later ones, the LB 2s and 3s that we're seeing that I think will be conversation pieces next year of, do we even consider them? Wilson, like you said, Jamin Davis. I'm shocked how high Zaven Collins was up there. Like, I didn't expect him to finish in the top 30, honestly, as just boring as he was. I never saw a huge week out of Zaven Collins. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it was just a consistent. I would rather have had Anzalone, it feels like, and yet they both were within a couple points of each other. Just gross.
I'm looking at old consistent here, Demario Davis. I don't know if you all saw the alignments that they were playing for the New Orleans game, but you were seeing Werner and Ellis and Davis on the field.
Yeah, they did. They were doing base and 3 linebackers.
So it makes me wonder where we're going to see that those values, what happens to them going into next year.
And then finally, we'll jump back into defensive backs. Defensive back was, before the season, we said, hey, this was the common theme of the best defensive back rookie class for landing spots we could possibly ask for, with the likes of Jalen Petrie, Jaquan Brisker, Nick Cross, so on and so forth. And it, more than we ever could have thought. If we look across the board, there's some consistent names we see. We're all going to have Derwin James at number 1. He, despite missing games, was number 2 overall on a per game basis. So Derwin James is still Derwin James. Hard to ever get past the ability. Sucks with the injury because every week is, waiting with bated breath. Jorge, yours then goes Jordan Poyer, Jamal Adams, Jalen Thompson, Kyle Duggar, Kenny Moore, Jeremy Chin. A lot of injuries, man. I mean, your injury list is Derwin James missed time, Jordan Poyer missed time, Jamal Adams missed time, Kyle Duggar missed time, Kenny Moore's missed time, Antoine Winfield did, Kevin Byard did, Jonathan Abrams not even on a team. I mean, shit. It's a who's who.
I will say, though, Jalen Ramsey is somebody who does not surprise me. He finished, I think he's in the top 15 finish this year in points.
He was
not a shutdown guy. Not in the traditional sense where he stays on one side of it. Like he follows and he gets the tackles. He was the he was the guy who I thought was the more Kenny Moore-ish amongst all defensive backs, but then Kenny Moore wasn't even Kenny Moore this year in terms of fantasy production. One of the rare cornerbacks that could slide into a defensive back spot into your roster and produce. But Ramsey doesn't surprise me, though. I'm kind of That's probably the one pick out of all these that I'm pretty happy about. Yeah, because he gets a cornerback. So
Yeah, it was a great pick. He finishes the DB8 overall. Each week was solid production. I very similar names: Derwin James, Jeremy Chin, Jesse Bates. I have up high, but when it came to actual draft like rankings, I moved him out of my top 15 even, and moved Von Bell ahead of him. Jamal Adams, Buda Baker, Justin Simmons. I mean the names. There's Kenny Moore, Harrison Smith missed time, Jaron Curse, Jordan Whitehead had brief weeks here and there, and then Kevin Byard had occasionally glimpses, but he finished. He had a down season as a whole. Mike, the only name really, I mean, you obviously had Jonathan Abram, Kenny Moore. You had Logan Ryan, who missed most of the, a lot of the time, did come back and was inserted into a decent spot and a decent role. If he's with Tampa next year, you think Logan Ryan could be another guy that you might see in your top 15?
No.
Me either. But let's talk about the one that you hit that no one else did and was Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit was the DB8 on the year, or DB9.
So
just solid.
So just
strong finish after the bye week, and actually pretty consistent throughout the whole season. Actually,
so just breaking news right here. They NFL just called the Bengals-Bill game a no contest.
Yep.
It will not be resumed, and the AFC title game could be played on a neutral site.
Are they adding the 8th team in or whatever?
I have not seen that in the flash breaking news blurb, but I have to dig into that more. But there we go, folks.
Situation, but positive. Happy to see. Here, let's talk about him real quick.
Yeah, we wrote about him a lot. We talked about him a lot, whether it's in our articles or here. I mean, Damar Hamlin had some really good weeks for IDP, and us, just like the rest of the collective, world here on my local news, we're talking about Damar Hamlin. Like everywhere is talking about Damar Hamlin. The president and his wife are talking to Damar Hamlin. So, and his family, we really wish him the best. Scary stuff. Him and his family, and I don't know if you heard what Josh Allen had to say today too. He was also saying about, as horrible and horrific as what happened with, tragic. I shouldn't say horrific, but just horrible what happened to Hamlin. Seeing a lot on Twitter the T. Higgins bashing, and that needs to stop right away, because that was not
nobody. There's nothing. Nobody's fault at all. Mike, I do have another question, because when I look at the overall rankings at the end of the season, one thing that stands out to me, and this is more of a ideology question, I see 2 defensive backs from Cleveland, both in the top 15. John Johnson III at 15th, Grant Delpit at 9th. Is that a product of the lack of linebackers as a whole, or is it, scheme? What's your 2 cents on that?
Probably a little bit of both. You had missed tackles, and then you have then you have scheme. He was around the ball a little bit. I wouldn't say he was close to what he, wasn't his necessarily role, what he was doing in LA, but when you look at the snaps, he was still mostly deep. He had about 320 between box and slot, and that was pretty much consistent throughout the whole season. The week he had double-digit box snaps over the last 3 weeks, but still 26, 29, 44 deep. So just one of those things where he was around the ball. But I'm not expecting it. I'm not expecting him to again produce the similar numbers, but I think it was just a matter of just lack of linebackers around the ball and scheme a little bit.
And that's what I was looking at too, is the number, the safeties that had the most snaps deep were Quandre Diggs, Cameron Bynum, Javon Holland, Devin McCourty, Kareem Jackson, Tashawn Gibson, Andre Sisco, Deron Harmon, Malik Hooker, Jesse Bates, Marcus Epps, Juan Thornhill, and John Johnson III. Those are the top 13. And none of those names outside of John Johnson were inside the top 15 overall as the season went on. And so I think that except there was one, I apologize. I said Rayshon Jenkins, and he did finish there. Him and
well, Jesus, I mean, he had a 50-point day.
Correct. Exactly. And that's, attributed completely, but we'll see some of these, that's not an uncommon trend is that we're seeing box safe of the top 15 of the end of the season. The names are players that are either playing a ton of box snaps or actually corners, which is crazy. Desmond King, Rasul Douglas, Jalen Ramsey, Julian Love, and L'Jarius Sneed get cornerback recognition, but they played a lot of more like slot and more safety role than anything. But Jalen Petrie, as a rookie, guys, is he got to look back and see. He's got to be the first rookie defensive back to lead the league in scoring. I mean, since maybe Derwin James. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah. Just unreal.
I mean, look at those last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Look at that. Starting from week 13, 16,
MVP,
12, 13.
DB MVP.
Absolutely. And of that, we asked at the beginning of the season, the defensive back, rookie, player of the year, whatever. And Hollywood and Bob thought it'd be Kyle Hamilton. Mike, you and I picked Nick Cross, and Gary picked Jalen Petrie. And, again, Gary, spot on with that. But come on, to be number one is absolutely crazy. So he is my IDP MVP based off of the draft capital and everything else. Jorge, who would your IDP MVP be if you had to give it to someone across all positions, really?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Let me.
Zaire Franklin for me.
Ooh, great answer. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go before I say his name. I just want to make sure the process is somewhat sound here. Someone who are we talking about someone who just outperformed where they were being drafted selected?
Realistically, yeah.
I'd say Greenlaw.
That would be solid.
Yeah. He's probably somebody that I will definitely be heavily invested in next year. Rashaan Evans is another one who just came out of nowhere.
Frankie Louvu could be a name that people could mention as well. The thing with Frankie Louvu, though, over someone like Zaire Franklin, when he was on my team, any team he was on, as long as Darius Leonard was out, I wasn't questioning if I want to start Zaire Franklin. If there was a start, who starts, do you start Levante David or Zaire Franklin? I was always taking Franklin. But when the question of Frankie Louvu versus Jordan Hicks, I'd be like, oh man, probably Hicks, because I didn't trust Frankie Louvu as much, whereas I trusted Zaire Franklin more so. And I don't know if that goes into an MVP. Is that someone that I would week in and week out start without question or without trepidation? But three big names, guys. Who? Let's see.
Well, I mean, Franklin totally exceeded his ADP, and then he was in on 100% of the snaps. I don't think he missed a snap. So
yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, right there. I mean, you probably if you could have conceivably had a three started Oluokun, CJ Mosley, and Zaire Franklin as your three linebackers every week.
Yeah, I mean, you could have started Oluokun, Nick Bolton, Franklin. You could, throw in Drew Tranquil, and all of a sudden you have 4 of the top 5 at defensive line. There's a good case to be made that you could have had Hassan Reddick, Christian Wilkins, and one of Bosa or Crosby. And at defensive back, easily could have had Jalen Petrie, L'Jarius Sneed, and Hufanga as your 3 DBs. And never again would I have ever assumed that would have been the case. But Jorge, if it doesn't say anything, it says, what the heck? We don't know shit.
Yeah,
We're
defensive
here-
backs. You don't know. No defensive. I mean, there's going to be a completely different top 15 next year.
Correct.
Completely different top 15.
Yep. And it will probably be Derwin James number 1 in
I
our
will
rankings.
probably have Jalen Petre 1 and Derwin 2, and then the next 12 or 13,
clue.
whatever. Don't.
I really don't. I mean,
a
I could
dartboard.
make.
I don't care.
I
Close
think
your
that
eyes and pick.
Jaquan Brisker could be in my top 5, and I don't think I would bat an eye. I think the situation.
I think I would probably then start looking at the bad teams.
Yeah.
Maybe filling in at that point. Okay, which out of all these bad teams with horrible records that didn't do much to improve their roster, who played the more box snaps, who was closer to the line of scrimmage? Okay, well now my process is starting to. But yeah, for. So.
But I will say, keep this in mind with L'Jarius Sneed. Last week, as
Don't
I
fall
was,
into the trap of Kenny Moore.
I won't. But what I said, I was mentioning L'Jarius Sneed as a corner out wide, and that's 2 weeks in a row, and this will probably be 3. There's a chance that he is he's going to be a corner now instead of that slot, line of scrimmage guy that really gained all the points. But we shall talk more about that as the season goes on. I think next week I would love to do, and anybody listening that would like to be part and join us, I'd love to. I'm going to set up an IDP playoff league through whichever site will allow me to host it for the easiest capability. And I would like to accept anybody, the first, 8-9 people that reach out that want to join us 3. Come on in. Well, I'll have more details to follow, but I think that'll be an interesting format that I've never done before. So you guys
never done the playoff?
IDP only? No. I've done playoff leagues for offense every year for forever, it feels like, but never just an IDP. So
there we go.
There you go.
Looking
Sounds like
forward to it.
Mike's in. But you guys, this week, anything final words?
Yeah, actually. So we did some consolidation here behind the scenes. And so, we had
Nate, you're
Shoot the
fired.
Gap podcast. Yeah. we had the Shoot the Gap
He did
podcast.
not find that amusing.
That was hilarious.
I didn't even hear it. Couldn't hear it over.
Oh, Jorge said he'd been doing some consolidating, and I just said, yeah, Nate, you're fired.
Oh, sweet. Thank God. One less thing I have to worry about.
Well, no, this is horrible. One less IDP content creator who's we're missing so many of those. Although we're not, the IDP community is growing. But that's all I was going with. So all of our podcasts, Fourth and Frames, Shoot the Gav, Daily Fix, Dynasty 365, we are now converting them all under the banner of the Fantasy and Frames podcast. So you can still find all of our shows. Now it's the Shoot the Gap show or the Daily Fix show, so on and so forth. But you just need to subscribe to one podcast to get all of our shows. For those who are subscribed to Shoot the Gap, you will now know when you go to your Apple podcast or your Spotify, it now says Fantasy and Frames podcast, but all of the Shoot the Gap episodes are still there, as well as all the other episodes are being migrated over there from the other 3 shows. So one podcast here going forward, the Fantasy and Frames podcast, but all of our shows will be under that banner going forward this year.
I look forward to another season. There is no off season. We know that. We're going to have content throughout the off season. I'm sure it might not be as thorough and in your face as the regular season may be from an IDP standpoint, but I'm sure the itch will always be there and I'll have to scratch it. So
there you go.
I won't ask you to scratch that itch.
Thank you
Mike,
very much.
You're out. You're welcome. That shoulder's already pretty tired. So
You won't hear from me until March or April, I think, once the season ends.
in hibernation, he goes.
I take.
We all need it.
We
We all need it.
I take an off season, so it's like, I needed to step away. It'll be weird waking up on Monday and not have to spend 2 hours with the linebackers.
I know.
It'll be nice.
It is nice.
That's going to be definitely nice that I don't have to get up and go through all the snaps and do all that. So that'll be nice.
Sleep in. You've earned it. So for Mike, for Jorge, I'm Nate. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you soon.